Joining me now is global risk analyst John Sitilides. John, thanks so much for joining.
Great to be with you, Bree.
So I wanted to know, what does this latest news mean for our relationship with China?
Well, it's something that we've seen coming for quite some time, Bree. The Chinese government has a strategy called String of Pearls in the Indian Ocean, where they're setting up a whole host of logistical bases that then become military bases. And they already have them in countries such as Burma and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and in the Maldives. Now they're establishing a base in the tiny African country of Djibouti, right next to one of the world's most important strategic choke points. And from the Chinese perspective, it's to help them better assure access to natural resources they need for their economy and to ensure shipping to destination markets in Europe and the like for Chinese finished products. But it's the first time they've established a military base openly in any other part of the world, and it probably is the beginning of a long series of bases that the Chinese will look to establish, perhaps even in Central America near the Panama Canal, and now near the Azores Islands, which belong to Portugal in the North Atlantic.
What do you think their true motives are behind staffing this overseas base?
I believe they see themselves as not simply a regional power, but as a global power. And as a global power that will compete with the United States, certainly looking to replace the United States as the primary naval and military power in the Pacific region, but also to ensure a worldwide chain of bases and facilities to ensure that China's global economy, the largest in the world, will be able to access bases, protect shipping lanes, and probably most importantly, to be able to influence countries, governments around the world in ways that are highly advantageous to China's economy, not in the next several years, but for decades to come throughout the 21st century.
So for a long time, China prided itself on being different, a different kind of superpower than the United States. They weren't seeking to be this aggressive, expansionist country, but rather, they just sought to maintain their own borders. So why has that longtime policy of just preserving their own borders, of not being super expansionist militarily, why has that changed?
There's been a significant ramping up of this military posture under President Xi Jinping. And I think the Chinese also take a historical perspective here, Bree. They see themselves as the inheritors of a grand civilization that was once the world's most powerful empire. It suffered what it feels to be humiliation at the hands of the United Kingdom and the United States for the last 150 years. They are absolutely determined to take what they consider to be their rightful place in the global economy and in the global international system, and perhaps to rewrite the rules that have governed the international system since World War II for the last 70 years in ways that help to not only attain global supremacy, but to perpetuate it in ways that will move the United States out of Asia, far back into the Eastern Pacific, and to allow China to compete with the United States for global hegemony, and really to bring order and stability of a different kind to the international economic system.
Do you think their expansionist behavior could, mess up or upset the global order enough to potentially spark a conflict with the United States sometime in the immediate future? Do you not foresee that?
I'd like to think that both countries are governed by responsible authorities, including in China, which really doesn't have an interest, Bree, in a military conflict with the United States or, for that matter, any other country. Remember, China is surrounded by countries that are afraid of China, that are intimidated by China, or have historical animosity. Those are largely our allies. But China is already taking very dangerous steps in the South China Sea, which may be the single most important waterway in the world. 1/3 of all the world's commerce and energy resources ship through this sea. And the Chinese have manufactured artificial islands and claimed sovereignty in areas that used to be used for freedom of navigation, for open shipping lanes. And it really is up to the United States Navy to protect those shipping lanes for our own economy and for the good of the international economic system. So we're envisioning, unfortunately, the possibility of some type of not only competition, but potential conflict because of China's upending the international legal system in the South China Sea.
I want to turn your attention for a second to North Korea. The Hermit Kingdom has threatened to reduce the United States to a, quote, pile of ash if Donald Trump tries to stop their nuclear program. Should we take this threat seriously?
With the absolute greatest seriousness, Bree. One noted cover story recently calls North Korea the worst problem in the world. We have here a regime that is only concerned with the survival of the regime, the ruling family, and the henchmen that keep it in power, and have absolutely no regard for the population, 25 or 26 million North Koreans, that the regime largely considers its slave colony in order to perpetuate its control on government in North Korea. And in order to protect itself against any type of attack or any type of threat, to bring about a reunification of the Korean Peninsula or the denuclearization of North Korea, they're prepared to potentially incinerate major cities in South Korea like Seoul, to attack American allies in Japan and Taiwan, potentially to even strike at U.S. bases in Guam, in Okinawa, in Japan, that is, and in the Pacific region. And now, unfortunately, we learn that they continue to accelerate their ballistic missile program so they can strike Alaska potentially, not with great accuracy yet, but they're looking to put nuclear weapons on these intercontinental ballistic missiles so that potentially in the first Trump administration, in the next 3 to 4 years, President Trump will face the very real possibility that North Korea will be able to attack cities on the west coast of the United States with nuclear weapons. And something has to be done about this over the next 3 to 4 years, or we're going to have to force ourselves to live with this most dangerous regime keeping our cities hostage.